Super cool doomsday story. Floods, extreme cold, high temperatures, earthquakes, tsunamis, insect disasters, acid rain. The female protagonist, who was an orphan, experienced all of the above natural disasters in just 3 years. But in the end, she couldn't escape the attacks of the scumbag and her best friend. After the female protagonist was reborn 3 days before the doomsday happened, she used her past life experience to launch the most thrilling revenge against the scumbag and scumbag friend. Jessica looked incredulously at the familiar scene in front of her. She was a little dazed. She actually returned to the apartment she lived in 3 years ago. 3 years ago, a super typhoon brought 3 months of heavy rain, submerging the entire city. After the typhoon ended, various natural disasters continued to occur, wiping out most of humanity. Before the doomsday arrived, her scumbag boyfriend secretly gave the jade pendant he bought to her best friend. Unexpectedly, the pendant had a strange space inside. In order to monopolize the space, she was pushed down from upstairs by the two of them. The sound of the message in her phone brought her back to reality. Looking at the time, it is now 9:40 a.m. on October 4th, 2024, with less than 3 days left until the arrival of the super typhoon. Since she has returned, Jessica has no intention of giving up. She takes out a needle, pricks her finger, and drops the blood on the pendant. The next second, the pendant bursts into a red light, taking her into an empty room. The layout of the room is similar to an apartment, with 2 bedrooms and a living room, about 90 square meters. There is also a small piece of land of about 10 square meters on the balcony. On the wall of the living room, there is a timer hanging. After leaving the space, Jessica has the memory of another set of rooms in her mind. As long as she concentrates, she can perform any operation of storing or retrieving things in the room. The countdown only starts when someone enters. At all other times, it remains in a stagnant state. In this state, any food placed inside will remain as fresh as when it was first put in, regardless of how long it stays. Equipped with a space pendant, Jessica is confident that she can survive any natural disaster and sees the opportunity to seek revenge on the despicable man and woman. Jessica has made a list of all the supplies she can think of on paper. Just the medications alone took up 3 full sheets of A4 paper. However, some of the medications are simply unavailable at the pharmacy. Jessica remembered that she has an elementary school classmate named Jim, who works as a pharmaceutical representative. After contacting Jim, Jessica ordered $50,000 worth of medications from him, with the condition that she must receive the goods tonight. After hanging up the phone, Jessica rented a small truck and immediately went to a construction company to order 2 vault-grade steel doors to ensure that no one could break in. The cost of just hiring the installation crew alone amounted to $10,000. Jessica gave the keys to her house to the crew and instructed them to start installing right away. Then, Jessica went to the glass store across the street and ordered the strongest explosion-proof glass. She left her address and instructed the crew to go directly there for installation. Following closely, she drove to the largest clothing wholesale market in the city. She bought a total of $20,000 worth of winter coats, down jackets, warm clothes, scarves, gloves, wool socks, warm boots, hiking boots, and snow boots. After the boss packed all these items into the rented truck and closed the door, Jessica stored all the supplies in the space of her house. Since diesel fuel for the inflatable boat cannot be purchased privately, luckily the truck was a diesel model. After filling up the truck with fuel, she drove to a deserted place and transferred the diesel into the prepared oil drums. Jessica then ran to all the gas stations in the city and finally managed to get 20 barrels of diesel. Time was running out, and Jessica couldn't afford to rest. She drove to the largest outdoor equipment wholesale market in the city, coincidentally stumbling upon a store that was being transferred. The boss was having a clearance sale. She bought an inflatable boat, a first aid kit, a tent, an axe, climbing ropes, binoculars, a radio, a waterproof flashlight, and cold-resistant sleeping bags, as well as a supersized solar charger. After spending another $30,000, Jessica arrived at the wholesale market for daily necessities. She bought laundry detergent, shower gel, shampoo, toothbrushes, toothpaste, lighters, electric kettles, heating pads, down blankets, alcohol stoves, alcohol blocks, induction cookers, and sanitary napkins. She didn't miss anything that she could think of. After purchasing all the daily necessities, Jessica turned to the neighboring fruit wholesale market and bought $10,000 worth of fruits. These fruits could be stored in the pendant space for decades without spoiling. After completing all of this, it was already dark outside. Looking at Jim's message on her phone, Jessica drove towards Jim's company. Half an hour later, she was delighted to see more than 20 boxes of medicines in front of her. These were the most precious things during the apocalypse. Before loading the car, Jessica reminded Jim that a typhoon was coming and advised him to stock up on supplies at home. She wondered if he would believe her. The most painful thing in life is knowing that the end is coming, yet being unable to save others. Jessica thought to herself that if she were to speak out, she would surely be deemed insane. After storing the medicine in her space, Jessica went to the university town and enjoyed a good meal. Perhaps this would be her last feast. After finishing, Jessica asked the boss for the contact information of a coal cellar. Taking advantage of the night, Jessica drove to find the cellar. She bought 500 kilograms of charcoal and 20 bottles of gas cylinders. Coal balls were more expensive, so she only bought 2,000 of them. By the time Jessica returned to the residential area, it was already 10 p.m. Upon entering the space and seeing the abundance of supplies, Jessica sighed at how much money she had spent. In just one day, she had used up half of her savings. Suddenly, everything went black before Jessica's eyes. She was unexpectedly kicked out of the space. She focused her attention and tried to enter again. Jessica was surprised when she was suddenly blocked by an invisible barrier. Could it be that the space had greedily taken all her supplies? After scanning the space with her mind, Jessica discovered that the countdown in the living room had reset to 0. It was then that Jessica realized that people could only stay in this space for 2 hours. If they exceeded the time limit, they would be expelled from the space. After comfortably taking a shower, Jessica noticed that the timer in the space had already refreshed. It seemed that the refresh rate was quite fast. After sleeping for a few hours, Jessica arrived at the farmer's market at 5 a.m. the next day. During this time period, the vegetables and fruits were the freshest. Radishes, tomatoes, eggplants, and potatoes were absolutely essential. Soybeans, rice, cooking oil, eggs, and flour were also on the list, along with beef, lamb, pork, fish, chicken, and duck meat. She also bought various condiments, as well as several chopping knives and boning knives. In addition, she purchased a variety of fruit seedlings and a large quantity of vegetable seeds. Jessica spent the entire day at the farmer's market. After returning home, Jessica collapsed onto the sofa and stared at the remaining balance of only $20,000 in her bank account. Immediately, she ordered takeout, a feast of fish, meat, grilled skewers, buns, steamed dumplings, and fried dough sticks, all worth a delicious $20,000. She stored everything in her space. Having completed everything, Jessica stood on the balcony and quietly watched the last bustling moments of the city. She always felt like she was missing something, but couldn't remember what it was. In the early morning, Jessica discovered that the timer in her space had increased by 2 hours and 10 minutes. It seemed that time in this space could be accumulated. This made Jessica ecstatic because as long as she hid in the space when the disaster struck, she would be able to survive. The next day, Jessica was awakened by a call from the renovation worker. It took the worker half the morning to finally install the blast-proof door and glass. After seeing off the worker, Jessica received a call from her boyfriend, Eric. "Jessica, my birthday party is tonight. Don't be late," Eric said. Eric lives on the 6th floor, while Jessica lives on the 16th floor. If you only listen to his voice, Eric seems gentle. However, Jessica, who has experienced a lifetime of heavy work, has long seen through his true colors. It's clear that he likes Belle, but he wants Jessica to be his girlfriend. After hanging up the phone, Jessica deleted Eric's phone number. She drove to the city library, avoiding surveillance. She secretly put all the books she wanted into her space. She thought that if one day the disaster ended, these books could quickly help humanity establish a new civilization. She is not a saint, but if she can save human civilization, it would be even better. After returning the car to the rental company, the boss refunded Jessica a $3,000 deposit. This money is now her entire savings. When I returned, the typhoon unexpectedly started blowing ahead of time. Pedestrians on the street were blown down to the ground. There was a girl hugging the roadside electric pole. Jessica had to pay an extra $500 to call for a car. It was a black SUV driven by a man in his 20s. He was tall, standing at 1.85 meters, and had a particularly handsome appearance. There was also a cute 4 or 5-year-old girl sitting in the back of the car. Jessica sighed and thought, if it wasn't the end of the world, she might pursue this man. The man arrived at the residential area in just a few minutes. When they got off the car, Jessica reminded the man that the typhoon would be severe and it was still possible to stock up on supplies. After saying that, she quickly walked into the elevator. When Jessica walked out of the elevator, she saw Eric and Belle standing at her doorstep. As soon as Eric saw Jessica, he instantly turned cold. "Why didn't you come to my birthday?" Jessica said coldly. "Are we close? Why should I go to your birthday?" Belle began to speak at this moment. "Today is the senior's birthday. Everyone has been waiting for you for a long time." Jessica sneered and asked, "Are you deaf? Am I familiar with you?" At this moment, Eric pulled Belle and was about to leave, but Belle saw the pendant on Jessica's neck. "Jessica, the pendant you're wearing is really beautiful. Can you transfer it to me? I'm willing to pay any amount." Jessica was suddenly shocked. It seems that they know the secret of the pendant having space. Otherwise, they wouldn't have deceived the pendant in the previous life. Jessica didn't know how they found out. Jessica asked Belle if she wanted it. Just as Belle was about to say yes, she saw Jessica grab the pendant and throw it on the ground. The pendant instantly shattered into pieces and turned into a pile of garbage. After the spatial binding, the pendant became useless. Now, only Jessica can open the space. Angry, Eric pulled Belle into the elevator and left. After they left, Jessica quickly entered the house and locked the blast door. Throughout the night, Jessica didn't rest at all. With the onslaught of strong winds and heavy rain, the city quickly experienced water and power outages. Jessica, as much as possible, cooked her food thoroughly before storing it in her space. This way, when Doomsday truly arrived, she would only need to take it out from her space and still be able to enjoy a hot meal. The next day, Jessica was awakened by the sound of a power drill at noon. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and the rainstorm and typhoon were howling. The entire world was pitch black, making it impossible to distinguish day from night. Everyone was in a panic. Short video platforms were filled with videos of cities affected by the disaster. Trees were uprooted by the strong winds, and people who couldn't make it home had their cars blown into the river. A massive tornado even lifted the factory's metal sheets into the sky. The whole world was filled with cries of despair. Just as Jessica put down her phone, the sound of the power drill resurfaced. She was surprised because she remembered clearly that she was the only one living on the 16th floor. Faintly, Jessica could also hear the voice of a child. Unable to resist her curiosity, Jessica opened her door and walked towards the neighboring room. 1602. The door was wide open. Jessica saw the man who had driven her yesterday. To her surprise, he had installed 3 blast-proof doors in his house. When the man saw Jessica, he smiled and gestured for her to continue inside. Jessica retreated to her own room, feeling a bit flustered. This life was clearly different from the previous one. The typhoon arrived several hours early, and there was a handsome new neighbor. Could it be that she had been reborn and changed something? Jessica's mind was unusually clear. Even if the man was handsome, she had to be cautious. In the previous life, she had witnessed countless tragedies. In the afternoon, the typhoon became even more fierce. The heavy rain pounded against the blast-proof glass. In just one day, the streets had turned into rivers. The sky was filled with dark clouds. Jessica stood on the balcony and took out her binoculars, looking at the entire city. In the distance, a massive tornado connected the sky and the earth, heading towards the city. Everything in its path was shattered. This scene left Jessica extremely shocked. In her memory, there was no tornado in the previous life. Could it be that her own rebirth had influenced many things, making the Doomsday even more devastating? Putting down the telescope, Jessica faintly heard the cry of a child. After hesitating for a moment, she finally knocked on the door of the next room. After a long time, the child finally opened the 3 anti-theft doors. Seeing the girl crying with red eyes, Jessica couldn't help but ask, "Where's your dad?" The girl cried and said, "My brother doesn't know where he went. He doesn't want Amy anymore." Jessica didn't know what happened to Amy, but she was very sure that the man hadn't left. Who would install 3 blast-proof doors before abandoning a child? Jessica temporarily took the little girl back to her own house and left a note on the door next door as a reminder. Looking at the apocalyptic scene outside, Jessica couldn't help but wonder why the man would go out now. After finding an animated film for Amy, Jessica picked up her phone and unexpectedly received a message from Eric. "Jessica, I was wrong. Please don't be angry. It's because you didn't celebrate my birthday that I couldn't control my emotions." Looking at Eric's message, Jessica smiled coldly. Being good-looking doesn't make up for being a scumbag.